I've been practicing medicine for over 25 years, and I've seen it. The world is hurting, people are sick, and even with our greatest scientific discoveries and technological breakthroughs, trends in health are not getting better. We weren't designed for this. This world as we know it, it's not our home. But there is a remedy. Our Creator designed us to be resilient creatures, and He's given us clues in the scriptures that have dramatic implication for our lives today. Let's talk about biblical prescriptions. Let's take a serious look at living as God intended. Are you ready? Let's get well, and let's go home.
Welcome to the Biblical Prescriptions for Life podcast, presented by Heartwise Ministries. I'm your host, Nick Evanson, here with Dr. James L. Marcum, behavioral cardiologist and author of the 7-week Bible study program, Biblical Prescriptions for Life. On today's podcast, we're going to be learning about biblical prescriptions that combat some of the most common yet preventable health conditions that Dr. Marcum treats every day. The advice given in this podcast is not intended to replace the care of your primary physician, and Dr. Marcum insists that listeners talk with their doctors before making changes to their healthcare regimen. If you enjoy the podcast, we ask that you get on iTunes or whatever podcasting platform you're listening on and give us a 5-star review. That'll really help us out. And Dr. Marcum, welcome to the podcast, and let's chat about your week at the office.
Yeah, Nick.
What was an interesting case you had?
Well, a lot of people don't realize that I still practice cardiology, and I actually work for the Chattanooga Heart Institute and probably put in about 60 hours on the average a week. What I do as speaker director of Heartwise Ministries is sort of in addition, but I try to mingle the two together. And one of the great cases I had this last week is a fellow that came in. A lot of people come to me because they're interested in getting at the cause of disease rather than just to treat the symptoms. And he had a stent several years ago, but beyond that, he had another 80% blockage in an artery that we really couldn't treat with modern medicine. It was too little to stent. We couldn't really bypass around it, and it was causing him problems. By what I mean problems is every time he would walk and do things, he would have angina. And this was a problem because he was like, I think he's in his early 40s when he first had this, but as the years had gone on, some things that he used to do and enjoy doing, he couldn't do as well.
Right.
So whenever he exerted himself to that point, he started getting chest tightness. So he came and he was on all the right medicines, and I said, listen, would you be interested in maybe getting at the cause, and let's have some biblical prescriptions? And he was very interested. And I said, listen, God has given us lots of ways that we can improve our physiology, lower the risk of stress. Would you like to try one today? And I said, the first thing is ask God to give you the power to do this. These things aren't easy sometimes because going with the Bible often goes against the counterculture.
Right.
We want to do, they have all these commercials. I've never seen a commercial says, did you know that God says that we should do this, and this is the way to improve your physiology, and there's no side effects, and you'll feel better, and it's the best treatment for chronic disease.
Yeah.
I haven't heard a commercial like that.
Yeah.
Not yet.
And we're probably not real likely to on mainstream television.
No, and that's why we're doing this with the podcast.
That's right.
To get the message out that God has the best way of doing things. And there's a place for modern medicine. And he was experiencing. So just something as simple as eating greens. He wasn't a big green eater. He just started really eating greens 3 times a day. He bought a container of some arugula and some spinach and some green mix, and he would just grab a bite of that and eat it 3 times a day. He would eat that just like someone else might take a pill.
Right.
And what that did for his physiology is greens have nitrates in them. And in the body, actually, as soon as you start chewing them, it gets turned into nitric oxide, which makes the arteries a little bit bigger and healthier.
Right.
And when this happens, guess what? It's not how much blockage he had, it's how much bigger the arteries get. He started eating less of the bad food he used to eat, which were fatty foods. He had more of the green foods, and sooner or later, he was able to do those activities again. So when he started doing that, and I encouraged him to pray about it as well, but he comes back not too long ago this week and says, I really feel a lot better. Can you give me another biblical prescription to work on that will help me just as much? And I added another one to it. So that was rewarding when you realize that God has given us ways to treat different things. And God's word, it not only applies to our health, our relationships, our finances, it not only saves us, but it also is interested in our health and getting us to feel better on a physiologic basis as well. So that was probably the most interesting thing I had happen this week.
Yeah. During the process of the last year, working with this Bible study, producing the videos and the book and everything, you haven't just been writing about it and teaching about it. You've been putting it into practice, right? I know we both have talked about this some, and we're both experiencing the benefits of it.
Yeah. Well, specifically, my family has some diabetes problems, and I was looking at some lab challenges, and I put God to the test. And, I ate pretty good. I thought I ate pretty good.
Uh-huh.
But when I prayed about it, I realized that I could do better, but I didn't have the willpower to do better. So I said, God, help me to do better. Show me where I should go next. I don't want to take a pill. I want to fix the problem.
Right.
So the next thing he's led me says, why don't you try getting rid of processed foods? So I slowly moved processed foods out of my life, especially foods that had high fructose corn syrup, which stimulates a chemical called insulin-like growth factor, as well as making dopamine receptors go crazy in your brain. It's addictive.
Oh, yeah.
Sugar is addictive.
Very much.
And I realized that, yes, I have an addiction here. And as I got off that addiction, my chemistry started improving. My weight came off. My blood sugar got much better. But I realized the most important thing was that God was giving me power. He was part of my life. He was interested in every aspect of his life. He was doing this with me and for me. And that was really encouraging from a spiritual standpoint to see how God works and leads in a life. So yeah, that was very meaningful.
So let's clarify. You said you've been removing processed foods from your diet. What are we talking about? Are we talking?
Well, think about anything that's processed, anything that has chemicals in it, I try to eliminate as much as I can. And like I said, one of them is the chemical high fructose corn syrup. So to make it simple for people, anything that has a package or a container, I try to start eliminating those if possible. Now, there's some containers I have occasionally, like I'll have some beans, but I try to get the beans and I rinse them off to get the sodium.
Canned beans.
Yeah, I'll get those off of them. But as far as things like candy bars, crackers, chips, dip, those type of things. Soda pops. I never was bad about sodas. Cereal, anything in a can or package. But you'd be surprised. I would go to a Mexican restaurant sometimes and I would eat pretty healthy, but I would have a basket of chips and I put the chips in the dip, and then someone would come in and say, hey, would you like some more? And I'd say, oh yeah,
of course.
Even though I wasn't hungry.
Of course you do.
And that all adds up. Sometimes I go by the doctor's lounge, and you know how it is when you're stressed, you want something to sort of make you feel better, pick you up. So they have a bunch of like Rice Krispie bars and granola bars, all processed, and all of them have high fructose corn. You say, oh, granola bars are good.
Right.
But if you look at it, it has high fructose corn syrup. You think that this might be good. Oh, it has sodium in it. Oh, it has preservatives. Oh, it has color in it. So all of those things I sort of started adding up and said, I'm going to get rid of those. And then when I got rid of those, guess what? I didn't snack between meals. My metabolism started to change. I turned down insulin-like growth factor. But more than that, the addiction started to go away. But the true treatment for addiction is asking God to be a part of the healing plan. And I've been studying this week in Isaiah. And Isaiah talks about, Nick, how the real healing is a healing of the heart, the mind, where God changes you. Now, he uses physical healing to get our attention for spiritual healing. And if we look in the Bible, when God heals people, these miracles that are performed, well, it's not necessarily the miracle, because a lot of the people he healed eventually died anyway, right?
Right, yeah.
So he used healing to get our attention to the real healing, the spiritual healing that comes inside, when God literally changes your heart. And that healing, that transformation, that power happens every day when you accept the Lord as your Savior, ask for forgiveness of sin, ask him to be Lord of your life. He's promised to give us salvation. And because of that relationship, he gives you the power to make changes. He gives you the power to have a relationship, to learn about this, to grow in him, to start learning how to love, to have faith, all of these little things. So that transformation is the real spiritual healing we learn about in Isaiah. Now, the physical healing, well, that's nice to us, but God wants our hearts, create me a new heart. And that's very exciting. So when I saw my physical, then it pointed me back to my spiritual. And it shows how the physical and the spiritual work together. And that's what we try to talk about in biblical prescriptions. Modern medicine is great for emergencies, but it doesn't treat cause.
Right. Yeah.
And for treating cause, we want to get back to God's word and try to get back to his original plan as much as we can, even though we realize that genetics can sometimes be bad. Sometimes there's things we can't control, and sometimes we do need modern medicine to help get us over the hump.
Mm-hmm. One of the things in my life, an area that I've been working on, asking God to help me with, is nutrition as well. Just because I eat okay, not probably as healthy as you do now, but I'm working on it. But I just would overeat all the time just because it tasted good. And I was fairly active, and so I could get away with it. I wasn't putting on tons of weight, but it's still not healthy for me. Mm-hmm. And I was putting on more weight than I needed for sure. So over the last 6 months or so, and studying and also studying some of the science with you and realizing some of these things, God's really showed me, hey, you don't need to eat to satisfy your soul.
Right.
But rather just eat to fuel yourself, and eat the things that are going to fuel yourself the best. And so I've kind of changed my mindset about it. I like to eat certain things, but I've realized, God didn't give me these things. These are the things that are going to help my body and help me be a good steward of the gifts that God's given me in the physical body.
Mm-hmm. And what I try to do is everyone moves at different speeds. And remember, relationships grow at different rates. And the people that change the quickest in my practice are the people that are having the worst symptoms. You do it or you die. But it's hard for people that aren't sick to realize that things are going on underneath that they can't see. Mm-hmm. And that's the same with our spiritual lives. Sometimes when we don't have needs, it's hard to know there's something wrong with our spiritual life needs to improve. And sometimes God uses illness to bring healing in life. Mm-hmm. So God is a big God. He looks at it different, but this relationship is what gives us the power to learn about these biblical prescriptions, how to apply them for life, and how to see truth in our life.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about chronic disease, and thanks for sharing, some of your personal story too. I'm sure our listeners will appreciate your own story, rather than just hearing about some patients. But some of our listeners may not realize that chronic diseases are really a huge problem in our country.
Oh yeah.
You get to see it firsthand in your office. But I pulled up some statistics here from the CDC's website. These are among the most common, costly, and preventable problems. Back in 2012, about half of all adults had one or more chronic health problems. 1 of 4 adults had 2 or more chronic health problems. 7 of the top 10 causes of death in the year 2010 were chronic diseases, and 2 of which, heart disease and cancer, accounted for nearly 48% of all deaths in North America. And obesity is a huge concern as well. In 2010, more than 1/3 of all adults were obese, and 1 of 5 youths ages 2 through 19 were obese as well. Is this representative of what you see in your office, or? Well,
it's representative, but I would say my numbers are even worse. Living in what we call the stroke belt, the heart attack belt, Tennessee. We were based out of Chattanooga, and it's been estimated that we're the 5th heaviest city in America. That's a chronic disease, which leads to even more chronic disease.
Right.
But there's one chronic disease that I want to add to that list that a lot of times don't make the list because it's not easily measured. Obesity, blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, those are diagnoses that are easy.
Right.
But I want to add to that mental health. Mm-hmm. It's been estimated, Nick, that 1 in 3 people have a mental health disorder at some level. Mm-hmm. And that's a brain disease. That would be an anxiety, depression, phobia, some type of mental health condition. And you add that to the list, and the numbers even go up.
Right.
So it's real scary what's going on. And you're right, it's costing us lots of money. But Nick, a lot of people are making money off chronic disease.
How's that?
Well, for instance, diabetes type 2. Okay. 90% of diabetics are type 2 diabetics. That's often preventable and reversible.
Yeah.
But, the drug companies that make these 10 to 12 different medications, insulin, the Lancets, the blood sugar medicines, the glucometers, the hemoglobin A1C monitors, all the special diabetic foods that are out there, those are profitable. And if type 2 diabetes went away, that would all go away too.
The whole industry, would fall apart.
Exactly.
Sure.
But it goes, almost every chronic disease follows that pattern. High blood pressure, what about the medications? What about this? Arthritis, what about the medicines and narcotics, which have side effects as well? Obesity, all the obesity-related websites and products and, gastric bypass surgery and stapling and all those fad diets you see. So all of these things, if we think about it, they're making someone money and they're hurting the health of the world right now, because we are exporting our chronic disease in our media, in our way of life. Oh, let's be like Americans. They're the ones that are cool. But we're actually moving the diseases of chronic disease we're now seeing in other countries that used to not have it as much as they do now.
Yeah. We said that these are preventable behaviors, and the CDC has some stats about health risk behaviors that cause chronic diseases. In 2011, more than half of adults age 18 or older did not meet recommendations for aerobic exercise or physical activity. In 2011, 36% of adolescents and 38% of adults said they ate fruit less than once a day, and 38% of adolescents and 23% of adults said they ate vegetables less than once a day. Cigarette smoking accounts for more than 480,000 deaths each year, and drinking too much alcohol is responsible for 88,000 deaths each year, more than half of which are due to binge drinking. So it's pretty clear chronic disease is a huge problem. And there's a lot of simple things that we can do. And the CDC didn't come up with these ideas on their own.
No.
Where do these ideas come from?
These are originated back in God's very own health plan at the very beginning. God gave us recommendations on how to live in the Garden of Eden. And through the years, we've just sort of gotten off track. We weren't designed to gobble up fast food all the time. And that's another thing, sodium and high fructose corn syrup. We were designed to move and not sit. We were designed to be exercising and doing things and creative instead of watching TVs and doing cell phones all day long. So we were designed to be outdoors and not indoors. We were designed to drink water and not soda pops. We were designed to love and help each other, not to shun each other. And we were designed to use nice words and not mean words. We were, all these things we've gotten off base. And when we've done that, Nick, it's created stress. And that stress damages the body at some level, even the very genetics. The DNA changes when we're under chronic stress. So yes, the original plan was back at creation. We've moved away from this plan and it's hurt us. But that goes at even levels beyond, health. We think about worship. Are we worshiping the way we should be? Are we relating to God the way we should be? Or have we got off track even in that? So we have to chronically be evaluating. If there's listeners out there that want to weigh in on this, I want them to go to the biblicalprescriptions.com/podcast site. Let us know what you're thinking. Weigh in on this, because we want people to think. We want people to interact. We want people to be part of the solution. Because to do this, we're going to have to change people one at a time, using the Spirit of God to help them see what the truth is and what they need to do and where to get the power from.
Yeah. Now, you just mentioned a few things there that people can do for themselves. Let's go over them again.
Okay.
The 5 top things, or 6 or 7, however many you want to list.
Okay.
The top things that people can do for themselves to live more in harmony with God's design and improve their health.
Well, let's go back with some of the things that you were talking about, the chronic diseases. One that we can all do is drink water.
Yeah.
And people aren't drinking enough water. It's been as many 7 in 10 don't drink water. That puts stress on us. The other thing we can do is be outside and not inside. We're designed to be outside, vitamin D, fresh air, deep breaths, get outside. Another thing that we can do is get enough rest. How many people rest one day a week? How many people go to bed when the sun goes down, or they stay up all night watching TV or putting things in their mind? What else can we do? We can move. We can, I don't even call it exercise now because people get intimidated by exercise.
Yep.
But just get out of the chair and move around every hour. You talked about the lack of fiber. Okay, it's been estimated that 90% plus don't get enough fiber. Just eating fruits, vegetables, nuts, and grains. That doesn't say you can't eat anything, but let's focus on the positive things we can do. That might be 6 or 7 right there. And those are simple things that people can start doing right now. And I found when a person will focus on from one on that list and build on it, they do better. But the place to start, though, when you're making these changes, is you want to change for the right reason. You don't want to change because you want to be better or haughty or be healthy. Even though everyone wants to be healthy, you want to change to honor God and to improve that relationship. When you're doing it for the right reason, a loving reason, that helps the physiology of the brain. That helps the spirituality. You're changing your innards. And we talked earlier about this. You're actually being healed the way God wants us to heal by having a change of heart, a change of mind. He's living in you, helping you make those changes. Sounds pretty exciting, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
But I just wish we could get this message out and realizing how it's possible to do this. It's not that hard. You just have to be encouraged and go through the steps. To me, it's much easier to be healthy and living in a relationship with God than vice versa.
So that's a pretty good list, pretty comprehensive list of things that we can do. Doesn't cost us hardly any money. Doesn't cost us a whole lot of time, although we can spend a little bit of time to go do some movement outside, because unless you work outside, you're going to need to be intentional about that. And there are things that are straight out of, the Bible, the way that God directed us, designed us to live.
And in biblical prescriptions for life, what we've tried to do as a ministry is something that's unique. Not a lot of other people are doing what we're doing. And that's we acknowledge the place for modern medicine. We acknowledge lifestyle, but we really point people to the Bible and that relationship as a source of truth. And we try to find the evidence-based science that supports what God said. And Nick, even though that God says something in his word, even though the science has not proven it yet, the science someday, it might not be on earth, it might be somewhere else, will prove that everything that God says and recommends for us is true and good. We accept that by faith because we see how these other things like rest, we've proven that. Water, we've proven that. Movement, we've proven that. Being happy, we've proven that. That changes the chemistry of every cell in the body, slows down aging. Now, it doesn't reverse some genetic problems, but it's the best way to live. And even when things get old and die, guess what? We still have healing.
That's right.
Because God's changed our hearts.
That's right.
And you look back in the Bible, like in the New Testament, there's like 23 healings. Well, God healed those people, but eventually those people died. They died physically, but they were still healed because God transformed their hearts. So God looks at things much differently. We can't even imagine. Our minds are limited. But as we see God's plan in our lives, it helps everything else work together for the right reasons.
Let's talk about stewardship for a minute. Because, if you go to church, you're probably going to hear about being a good steward of the talents that God's given you and the resources God has given you. One of the talents and resources that you have is your health, your ability to function as God intended. Do you talk to your patients about stewardship?
Well, indirectly. But, when you think about stewardship, God has given us everything. And one of the best things that he's given us all equal amounts, he's given each of one of us 24 hours in a day, our time. We're stewards of our time. And when we take that time and use it for God, God's going to show us how to be stewards of that time as the day goes. We live one day at a time. We don't want to live in the past. The path is done. God's forgot about it. He's forgiven us. He's accepted us today. We're saved today. We can live in that hope. We don't live in tomorrow because we don't know what tomorrow was, but we have this amount of time. And part of this amount of time, now I do talk about, part of this amount of time is using it for God's will and plugging it in. And part of that is our finances, our health, our relationships, trying to understand what he wants us to do. So yes, stewardship is very important of our health because the better our health is, the better our worship is, the better we're able to serve, which is the purpose why we're here. Everything sort of works together, but stewardship is something important, and I usually talk about it indirectly.
Mm-hmm. One more statistic that I found on the CDC's website. In the year 2010, 86% of all healthcare spending was on people with one or more chronic medical conditions.
86%. Now that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what it is? Add 7 more years. I'm sure that hasn't gotten better.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to be a larger problem as we go on. And the real solution to the healthcare dilemma is getting back to biblical prescriptions for life.
That's right. And if you would like to learn more about biblical prescriptions for life, we invite you to visit us online at biblicalprescriptions.com /podcast. You can submit your questions there. And there's also a number of video resources available under the leaders page. If you want to start a small group, or you just want to find some short videos that you can use to help encourage other people and share them on social media, visit our website, biblicalprescriptions.com, and you can share all kinds of great health information with your friends there at the site. And we're going to go ahead and wrap it up today. Dr. Marcum, thank you so much for your insights.
My pleasure, and we hope to be doing this again. And I hope that the listeners will plug in their questions and concerns and be part of this dialogue, because we can all learn and grow together.
That's right. Yeah, you can submit your health questions or questions about the Bible study or whatever you'd like to say, any comments at biblicalprescriptions.com /podcast. And if you enjoyed today's discussion, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever podcasting platform you're listening on. That'll really help us out. And we just appreciate you listening. I'm your host, Nick Evanson, inviting you to join us again next week for another podcast where we'll be discussing more about getting well and going home.